Hi, and welcome back to the Shane Plays Out of the Abyss Notes series, where I give my notes and thoughts on DMing my group of intrepid players through Out of the Abyss, the 5th edition Underdark adventure at my my friendly local game store. I guess it's Intrepid too, but my players are definitely intrepid. So let's jump right in there. Just want to remind folks that if this is the first time you've seen this series, then what it is it's not an actual play. It's a recap of each session, like what I did as a DM. Maybe talk about some notes, rules notes on the campaign, all this different stuff, to kind of help you DM it yourself, or maybe get a better handle on D&D or DMing. And then we also do viewer feedback, and I think some people just watch it just to watch it, and then other people get DMing advice. So that's great. If you're a new viewer, just want to make sure this isn't an actual play or anything like that. And then if you're a returning viewer, thanks so much. Appreciate all the comments and interaction and feedback that this series gets. So let's jump right in. First of all, I want to say that it was ugly tie day at work today, right? And so I got this ugly tie, and I actually got a lot of compliments on it. So evidently my ugly fashion sense is not ugly enough. So there were some nice ugly ties there. But yeah, I actually got compliments on this. A lot of people liked it. It's a periodic table tie, and so maybe I'll wear it periodically. But I was definitely out of my element in the ugly tie day today. So I'll just have to table it till next time. Anyway, so we give inspiration at my group for bad puns. I just want to make that clear. Okay, so jumping right in, we got some viewer feedback. Last video, of course, was the second half of the big, nasty beholder fight. Let me get our viewer feedback up here, and I'm going to put on my +3 spectacles of viewer feedback, and we will jump right in to what we had last time. Now, last video was video 68, and Vasily said, "Hey, you said my name right. Thanks. I hope I just said it right again. I don't know. I don't know why I keep wondering if I'm getting that right, but anyway, you said." Anyway, about the monolith from Gracklestug, it is one of many batteries spread throughout the realms, imprisoning the essence of the dead god Caius, the worm that walks. Check out the adventure on DM's Guild called Window to the Past. It's pretty creepy and a great adventure. Okay, so the monolith that was in the Whirlstone tunnels in Gracklestug that the players had a little piece of black stone from is a battery imprisoning the essence of the dead god Caius, the worm that walks. And there's also some limited teleportation going on there. So thanks for that, Vasily. Let's see here. Josh Mann said, "I think I'm cheering for the beholder." Yes, most likely a lost cause. I got to be honest, I cannot confirm, but I also cannot deny that I may be cheering a little bit for the beholder myself. I mean, that would be sheer speculation, Josh, but thanks for the comment. Rob Plummer said, "I agree, Shane. Wizards of the Coast definitely let us down on the vast Oblivion part. There was no map. You can't even use Theater of the Mind on that. I used Elven Tower's map." Yep. And, I can't recommend Elven Tower enough for running Out of the Abyss. Got a great guide over there. What Rob's referring to is I spent some time last video talking about that there is no map. There's a general description of the Beholder's Lair, the vast Oblivium and that chasm and all of that. There's no map. There's a description, but it's a very detailed area where a major combat happens. So I really feel like I don't know. I don't know why they made that decision, but again, my thing is, you can say, oh, well, they're, have all these reasons. My thing is, as a customer, not as an enthusiast of the hobby in the game, but as a customer, if I'm going to buy a book that MSRP's at $50, I want it all laid out. If I'm buying a pre-made adventure for a reason. I did not buy that to glean information from as a source book. I bought it to run an adventure. So there you go. Rob Plummer also said on the globe of invulnerability and fly at the same time, talking about how Shedrack, the mage that's sort of the assistant to the beholder, it says in the book that he casts globe of invulnerability from a spell, if I remember right, and then he casts fly, and he flies off into the chasm to get away from the party if a fight breaks out. And then Elvin Tower pointed out, and I mentioned it in my last video, that you can't do that because fly and globe of invulnerability are both concentration spells. So then, Rob said, on the globe of invulnerability and fly at the same time, do you have to use concentration on a spell scroll? I didn't think so. So I said, I'll research that. And I went and looked, and per the Dungeon Master's Guide on page 141, yes, a spell cast, from a scroll or an item or whatever, still requires concentration if concentration is part of that spell. You don't need components, but if it's a concentration spell, you still have to concentrate on it. So that's pretty clear. Sometimes you go research that stuff and it's not as clear as you want it to be. Let's see here. I'm actually going to, and I don't normally do this, but I'm going to include some comments on previous videos. Because it's just really good comments, and I want to make sure to pass it along because it's stuff that's been discussed in previous videos. So on video 58, so 10 videos back, Emmanuel Acosta, and Emmanuel has left several good comments recently. So Emmanuel, I can't remember if you've commented before. I don't think you have, but welcome to the community. Welcome to the video series. Thanks for your feedback. If you've commented before and I've forgotten, I apologize, but I've definitely noticed your comments recently. So Emmanuel said, and this is from video 58, he said, because the enlarge reduce spell has duration, and this is where we're talking about in video 58, when they were fighting the Grey Dwarves, the Duergar that can enlarge or reduce at will. It's an inherent ability. What happens if they enlarge in an area that isn't big enough for them to enlarge all the way? And so this was Emmanuel's take on it. And to be quite honest, I can't remember what I said. I said I think that they just go to the max and then stop or whatever. I'd have to go look. But he said, because the enlarge reduce spell has duration, I'd rule that the creature continually enlarges to a maximum set by the spell, double size, weight multiplied by 8, etc., for the duration of the spell, but if full enlargement is impeded, the creature is under the squeezing into a small space rule on Player's Handbook, page 192. If the creature moves into a larger space, it will reach its full enlargement. As for the benefits of the enlarge effect, that'd be at the DM's discretion. This is what we're talking about. Well, if you don't enlarge all the way, then what? What are the benefits or negatives or whatever? Personally, and this is Emmanuel, he says, I'd rule that the benefit comes from being fully enlarged and not partially. It really makes sense if you think about the Alter Self spell, which allows you to partially increase your stature. In contrast to Enlarge, Alter Self doesn't give you any strength or combat benefits, so that should be the same for limited enlargement. I mean, I think that makes really good sense. So those are some great thoughts. And then Emmanuel went on to say he's finding these videos insightful to his home campaign, so he's enjoying these notes. Giving him tons of ideas to implement. So that's kind of what I was saying. Even if you're not playing or running, well, if you're playing Out of the Abyss, I probably wouldn't watch this until you're done, especially my players. But if you're not running it, you could still get some benefit, just talking about rules clarifications and kind of how I think through things as a DM. And of course, you don't have to agree with how I DM, right? And sometimes disagreeing with somebody will reinforce why you do something a certain way. So anyway, all right. Now this, I gotta admit, I got a comment on video 65 from United 1500. That's the name of the user, or the person making the comment. And he said, every session is epic. The style of narration through a DM's eyes enhances, and to me is a great form, kind of unique, of storytelling that keeps bringing me back for more. I'm like, wow, I get a lot of good feedback on here. and that's one of the reasons I keep doing the videos, as I've talked about before. I'm not going to rehash all that. But that, man, I've never thought of these videos as epic, but I do think that the campaign, as much as I complain about some of the way the book's put together or lack of information in the book, I do think Out of the Abyss is a great campaign. It's really won me over, because when my players first asked me to run it, I was like, I don't know, but I really like it a lot. But United 1500, thank you. I'm glad that, you see it that way, that, you actually see it as sort of storytelling, the way that we go through this campaign. So thank you for that. Also on 65, we got another comment from Emmanuel Acosta. So, again, I'm going to bring this out, from video 65 and not 68, because we've talked a lot about teleportation, in Out of the Abyss. And remember that it's hard to teleport in Out of the Abyss, because the Fair's Rest, that magical energy that suffuses the Underdark, impedes teleportation and scrying. So it's very hard to teleport around the Underdark. Now, Emmanuel points out that the only teleportation accessible to the players per the book that I could find is they come upon a member of the Society of Brilliance. Each member can use the teleport spell once per day. However, it can only teleport them to the location of another society member. Convincing them to teleport them is one thing, and will probably require high difficulty check, charisma, persuasion checks. Even then, there's no indication that the members know where another of the members is located. Essentially, this type of teleportation is unreliable. And then he said he really likes what I've done with the wand and the rod, and asked if he could use it. Absolutely. Anybody can use that wand. I mean, that's what these notes are for, but that was nice of Emmanuel to ask, hey, do you mind if I use it? Yeah, but the wand of, what do I call it? The wand of limited vengeancey Underdark teleportation is absolutely free to use. And I think it's a great limited way of moving people around the Underdark, especially when they're on the shopping trip for Vizeran, getting all these ingredients for the ritual he wants to cast. And then I point out in my comment back to Emmanuel that Elven Tower also has some suggestions. And I think Elven Tower even mentions there's like some treasure you can find, and he recommends putting a helm of teleportation in that and just using that. So there's different ways, but the Underdark is so big and so dangerous to travel around in, unless you just want to summarize all travel and just gloss it over. After you've made the point of how dangerous it is to travel around in the Underdark, even with that expedition with you, it can take a long time and be dangerous. And then you have your expedition members to watch out for. I recommend working in some form of teleportation. So there you go. All right. And then finally on video 68 from Emmanuel Acosta again. Hello, Emmanuel. He's had great feedback. Thank you, sir. He said, regarded blinding a beholder. And that's where we were talking last week about, if you cast blindness on a beholder, what'll happen? And I had said, well, you might be able to blind its eye stalks, and that would keep it from, casting its rays, but you wouldn't be able to blind its big central eye because that emanates an anti-magic cone. And Emmanuel found out that Jeremy Crawford, who's like one of the main rules people for D&D 5e, in fact, I think he's the official rules person for D&D 5e, on the Sage Advice site, he says a beholder's eye rays action refers to sight. Its anti-magic cone doesn't. One is affected by blindness while the other isn't. So, and then Emmanuel goes out to say, it could be the DM's discretion, but I thought it'd be cool to know what Crawford's ruling was. Yeah, so that makes sense to me. That you can blind the eye stalks, but you can't blind the main eye, because it literally, anytime the eye is open and looking around that central eye, it's got an anti-magic cone emanating out from it. So there we go. Good thoughts again. So that is the viewer feedback from video 68. So I'm going to take off my +3 spectacles of viewer feedback And then I'll get into some rule stuff that came up uh, during last session, and then I'll kind of recap what happened, uh, during the rest of the fight, and afterwards what should happen in the beholder layer after the fight's over, assuming that the party that you're DMing through this survives, because it is a tough fight. It's not supposed to be an easy fight. So anyway, on we go. Okay, so we had a few rules things came up last session. Like I said, I'm going to go over those, and this is not. I mean, this is still relevant to each session. But this is distinct from viewer feedback. Even though I'm doing clarifications or going over rules, this is stuff that specifically come out from my players or whatever during last session. So I usually go over that after viewer feedback, and then kind of recap. Okay, here's what happened during the session. That way I'm not like, okay, well, let's stop here and talk about this ruling that came up or whatever, right? So here was some stuff that came up. Does anti-magic field on the caster end bless on character outside of the field? And kind of looked at that, and we had some discussion at the table, and I finally went with no, because bless doesn't require concentration. So once it's cast, the divine favor of the deity or whatever is on that creature, on that character, and it's no longer the caster fueling that, if you will. Maybe that's the wrong call. Maybe somebody else knows different, but that's how I ruled. Since it's not a concentration spell, I ruled that anti-magic field hits them, and it doesn't matter. The cleric gets anti-magic field, but everybody else is still running around blessed, as long as they're not in the anti-magic field. And there's even something in anti-magic field that talks about as long as it's not a deity, but I don't think that would involve, because bless is a spell. It's a divine spell, but it's a spell. So it's not like a deity threw the blessing down so you can't block it or whatever. That's what I did. So basically my ruling would be, if say you cast fly on somebody and you're having to concentrate on that. If you get hit with an anti-magic field, I might rule that the flight, while the anti-magic field is on the caster, flight's no longer in effect. Because concentration applies, there's still some sort of connection between the caster and, right? Again, maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I'm going with it. So people have different thoughts on that. Dynamics of anti-magic field from a beholder, that cone, that 150-foot cone. Does a bridge, and remember there's all these different bridges up and down in this chasm, in this fight, does it block the anti-magic field? So what the question's really asking is does terrain or walls or any of that, will it block the anti-magic field? Like, let's say the cone's going out, and over in this little area there's a wall. So like casting a shadow behind that little area, does the anti-magic field not go like a shadow, in a beam of light? Like, is that little, like say I'm hiding behind a crate, right? And then this cone of anti-magic is sweeping or in that area, but I'm behind the crate, and that, is there like an area of free from the anti-magic field right behind the crate, like it's a light beam being cast? And it's a hard one, because it's like, well, I don't know. I mean, like, because if I was throwing a burning hands, or if I was throwing a fireball, you would have to take into account, well, is it going around this corner? Is it being blocked by this wall? Da, da, da. But you had to go by, because fireball will specifically say it, this, or I think detect magic can only go so deep into something. I think there's some spells that will, if material will block it or won't block it, it'll spell it out. But anti-magic field doesn't. Neither the beholder's anti-magic ray entry, nor, best I can tell, and I went and read it 2 or 3 times, the anti-magic field spell. It's just an area of effect in a cone in the case of the beholder. Anti-magic field itself is a sphere. So then you have to fall back, in my opinion, to the area of effect rules in the player's handbook, and this is also, I think, discussed further in Xanathar's, but the area of effect rules for a spell or whatever in the player's handbook, they basically talk about lines of sight and this and that, and only total cover will prevent the effect. So again, I'm welcome to other viewpoints or thoughts or experience. I did some searching on this, and there's not any super clear answers that I could tell. I didn't see anything in Sage Advice. Maybe it's out there, but best I could tell by the cone description of the area effect, without any further information, and if you're in the cone area and you're in total cover, then it's not affecting you. Other than that, the anti-magic field is affecting you. So that's best way I know to do it. You'd think it's just an area of anti-magic, and so it's going to permeate through structures and what, but there's nothing that specifically says that. So remember, sometimes you're like, well, I'm going to say it's just a field of anti-magic. Unless it specifically says otherwise, just go with the rules in the book for area of effect in the player's handbook. So that's my ruling on it. And then what I always do with my players, I say, here's how I'm going to rule for now. And then I say, I may research more later and have a different opinion. And if so, I'll explain why. But once, I'll do my best to be consistent. And if I have to deviate from that consistency, I'll say, well, look, I found this out. So I'm not going to retcon anything in the past, but from this point forward, here's how we're going to do it. Okay. Does disintegration ray also disintegrate items? And the reason that's asked is because, unfortunately, one of our player characters got disintegrated in the second part of the beholder fight. So the way disintegration works is, and I'm going by, I think, the disintegrate spell description, and the entry for disintegration ray in the beholder doesn't contradict this or add anything to it. Everything that character, that player, that creature, and everything it's wearing is reduced to a pile of dust, except for any magic items. And that's, I'm pretty sure that was the let me double check this here. I looked this up right before the, let's see, that's the beholder thingy. Yeah, disintegrate. This is 5th edition disintegrate spell. Now these are my +3 spectacles of reading browser window information. The spell, a disintegrated creature and everything it is wearing or carrying, except magic items, are reduced to a pile of fine gray dust. There you go. And the creature can be restored to life only by means of a true resurrection or a wish spell. So there you go. So that's a pretty clear answer on that one. And then let's see how. Okay, this came up. If you have automatic crit on a hit and roll a natural 20 in that attack, do you double crit? So let me explain how this came up. And most of the searching around, most of the answers that I found involved, can assassins stack critical hits? So the answer is, best I can tell, a hit is either a critical or not. It's like advantage, or it's like advantage and disadvantage. It's either there or it's not. It doesn't stack. Like you don't get 3 advantages or 2 disadvantages, and 3 advantages and 2 disadvantages cancel each other, but you still have 1. It doesn't work like that. You either have advantage or you have disadvantage, or you don't, or they cancel each other out. With crits, best I can tell, now I'm open to other people with better information, but best I can tell by reading the book for the player's handbook on combat, and also researching around and seeing what other people are saying online, it's either a crit or it's not. Like, you don't double crit. So, and this came up because if a beholder bites a paralyzed opponent and it hits, assuming it hits, it's automatically a crit. So the beholder did that in this last fight. Had somebody paralyzed and hit, but also rolled a natural 20 because they got advantage to attack, and it's also going to be a natural. It's also going to be an automatic crit if they hit. So rolled, boom, natural 20. So whoa, is that a double crit? Best I can tell, no. It's either a crit or it's not. And a crit, remember, to do a crit in 5th edition, a critical hit, if you score a critical hit in an attack, you double all the damage dice. All of the dice that are supposed to be rolled, including sneak attack, whatever, anything that adds dice to the damage, you roll those twice, or you double them or whatever. Well, you roll them twice, or you have enough dice to represent, that many doubled and roll, and then you add modifiers. So you don't, like, let's say that you're going to hit with a weapon that does, and my cats are fighting. I guess they're about to have a critical hit over there. See this? Look, critical hit. Come on, guys. Hey, stop. So they're being kind of catty. They love to play tabaxi. I don't know. Anyway, that ginger cat, the orange cat, the yellow cat, he kind of a bully to that girl cat, the big black fluffy girl cat. But anyway, it's an ongoing dynamic. Kids, what are you going to do? So anyway, for the way a crit works, let's say that you're going to do 1d6 plus 3 on a successful hit, and then you crit. Then you would roll 2d6, but only add the plus 3 once, right? Okay, so there you go. All right, so that's all of the kind of the notes and things that happened last session. Well, as far as the notes that came out from rules, let me make sure that I didn't leave anything else out. A couple of things I want to mention as far as kind of how I handle player dynamics. When I showed up last session, a player said, before we started, he said, I have something I want to talk about. And I said, okay. And he challenged me on, well, you've said this before, but then a couple of weeks ago, then you went this way with something. And I went, okay. I said, tell me what happened again. And he told me, and I said, man, that was 2 weeks ago. Unfortunately, I don't even remember that. So it's very hard for me to explain what was going on in my head when that happened. And what I said was, I've talked about in this video series before, we've established a private Facebook group so that we can communicate outside of sessions. And so I pass on, here's your XP awards, and hey, don't forget about this, and hey, I'm going to clarify a rule, and this and all, did all this stuff. Like I used it today to post a thing on, if you're going to roll up a character higher than first level, here's your starting wealth from the Dungeon Master's Guide, because we have a player that has to roll up a new character because they got disintegrated last time. So they're introducing a new character. And but what I said was, I'm sorry if whatever I did was confusing or you disagreed with it. I said, the problem is it was 2 weeks ago, so I literally, there may have been times where I'm like, I remember exactly what he's talking about, and I could say, here's why it happened. But in this one, I literally couldn't. I was like, I don't remember why and evidently I was inconsistent with something on a saving throw, or letting somebody re-roll something, or I think they rolled an advance, or I don't remember what it was. And it wasn't that what the player was asking was a bad question. It was like, I literally don't remember. I cannot give you a good answer on why I did whatever I did. I don't know. Sorry, buddy. And so what I said was, that I feel that, the Facebook group probably would be a better venue to bring that kind of thing up, like within a couple of days. And then, or, call me privately or text me or whatever. But, bringing it up 2 weeks later, and he was obviously a little frustrated, like he'd been sitting on it, right? Or been, really wanting, not to attack me, but like he was really like, this was bugging him. And I just don't know. So players, I encourage you, if you're going to ask your DM something, try to get back with him fairly quick, because I just forgot. I wasn't trying to dodge his question. I just don't remember why I did what I did. And I'm not perfect. I'm going to make mistakes. So the other thing is I kind of had to, I don't know if it's purposeful or not. I don't know if it's, giving somebody an inch and they'll take a mile. I don't know if it's any of that kind of thing, but we've talked a lot about what races and classes and character combinations and spells and this, that, and the other are allowed in this campaign. Now, from the get-go, I'm much more of a Tolkien guy, like classic D&D. The basic races, the basic classes, and all that is usually that's what I like. But again, I run at a store, so I like to be a lot more flexible and give people a lot more choice. And I don't want to just like Dragonborn to me just seem weird, right? I know if you've been playing, if you just started D&D in the past few years, Dragonborn might seem like the most normal thing in the world, but they still seem weird to me. Like, I mean, Draconians and Dragonlance were the enemy, So, but I try to be flexible. I don't want to be back in my day. So, I've said Player's Handbook, fine. When the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide came out, I said, go for it. And then after I had a chance to read through Xanathar's, I said, anything in Xanathar's is good. And so there's 3 different source books that are full of classes and races that they can play. Now, Volos is not on the table, pardon the pun, for what's allowed. Okay, and maybe in another campaign or whatever, but I don't want to get off into all that stuff, me personally. So, and then they'll say, well, can I use this Unearthed Arcana? I'm like, nope. I mean, maybe in a really rare instance, but Unearthed Arcana is playtest material. I don't want to bring it in. So, I'll have people, well, can I do this or that? And the easiest thing to do is to say, is it in the Player's Handbook? Is it in the Skag Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, or is it in Xanathar's? And if the answer is no, then it just makes it easy. Everybody understands. Well, last week, somehow people were talking about like Tabaxi were allowed now. And it just didn't occur to me to think, no, that I was like, oh, Xanathar's. I wasn't thinking. So now I've got to re-clarify, and I have like, no, it's got to be one of these 3 source books. And the player that needs to roll up a new character wanted to make a kobold rogue. And I'm like, and I said, so I restated at the table, these are the 3 source books that are cool. And then later they messaged me and said, so I want to be a kobold rogue. And I went, well, that's not an option. The kobold isn't an option in, the books that we use. And they said, well, it's in Volos. And I went, okay. So I went and looked in Volos, and it's not one of the standard playable races that's offered in Volos. There's a chapter on the kobolds and maybe some notes on a player kit, but there's not an actual race entry for player characters of a kobold in Volos. And so I had to go back and say, well, one, it's kobold is not really listed as a playable race per se in Volos, even though there is lore on kobolds. And 2, Volos is not for this campaign, one of the books that we use. So I would just encourage you as DMs, come up with a list of what's cool. And maybe you're way open. Anything goes, just check with me first. Or maybe you're like me, you're like, okay, I'm going to give you these options. You can do anything. There's your playground. Or maybe you're somewhere in the middle. But whatever it is, make sure your players know what your style is. And players respect your DM style. There's they probably have not just thrown that out there. They, like me, I've thought about it. Like, why do I want to go with these books and this and that and the other? And part of it is because there's only so much I want to keep up with as far as, all the different combinations and this and that and the other, and the powers and the abilities and lore and blah, blah, blah. And the other thing is, again, and this is a drum I beat all the time. Boom, boom, I'm beating that drum. The DM needs to enjoy the game too. In a sense, they're a player as far as they're to have fun. They're not a player as like they're, running a character in the story, but they're there to have fun. And if the campaign or all of the stuff involved in the campaign is a turnoff to them or not engaging or just like what, they're not going to have as much fun. So, just try to keep that in mind. So players, please respect, what your DMs, and be, and if somebody challenges me, I'll explain why. And I have before, and I'm happy to again. So DMs, be prepared to, say, here's kind of the boundary, and be able to explain why. So anyway, all right. So we're going to get into what, wrapping up the Beholder's Lair and dealing with, exploring the rest of it, the slaves, that sort of thing. And probably when we do that, suddenly this window is going to get even darker because I've got to go run my game tonight and finish this video when I get home. So the second part of the beholder fight, basically, one of the things I did was it's kind of like a boss battle in a video game where the tempo or the danger level kind of increases after you hit a certain point. And we had left the previous session with one of the monks uh, with a sunblade, basically a lightsaber, had flight or flying cast on them and was flying directly towards the beholder with the sunblade. So what I did at that point, because there's nothing in the beholder monster manual stat block that says when they attack with eye rays that the target has to be random. What it suggests for the appropriate challenge rating is that once it targets with its eye rays, that the type of eye ray that it uses is random. Now, you don't have to do that. If you let it select whatever eye ray it wants to use, I would probably increase the challenge rating of the beholder because that makes it, like a magnitude more dangerous. If whenever I attack a character, I can say, well, I'm using the disintegrate and um, the whatever the really dangerous stuff. And there's telekinesis, charm, all that stuff can be pretty crazy under the right circumstances. I mean, with telekinesis in this fight, with all these bridges and everything, you can just use telekinesis and take a character and shove them out over open space and down they go. But anyway, as it's written, it can use its eye beams whenever it wants, but you're supposed to randomly, roll or whatever to determine which eye beam actually hits. So I still kept that part of it, but I did at that point in the second session, especially with a monk shooting right at it. I no longer went random on who it was going to target. As long as that monk was close, then the beholder was on him hard with the eye beams, 3 on its turn, and then it gets 3 legendary actions. So I think there was a turn or two, or a round or two, where that monk was making a lot of saving throws because those eye beams were just like bam, 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 and some of it was like telekinesis, and some of it was like charm and fear, sleep. There was a lot of charm, fear, sleep coming up on the random rolls on the eye beams. But again, with the beholder, you don't have to make it random on which eye beam it's going to use. But if you do that, I would consider upping the complex or the challenge rating, and I wouldn't let it use an eye beam of any particular type more than once in any turn. Now, of course, it can, on a legendary action, when it's taking its extra actions at the end of other players' turns or creatures' turns or whatever, then you could probably reuse one. But on any individual turn, I wouldn't let it do 2 disintegrates, for example. So anyway, that definitely happened. So I kind of thought of that as, like I said, kind of the boss level. Now that we're at a certain point in the fight, the boss kind of increases. Another thing you can definitely do with this beholder, there's all kinds of space in this Karazikar's maw or whatever, for it to move around. And it was staying out of the range of melee and, using its anti-magic cone on various either, spellcasters or however it wanted to use it at any given time. But as soon as that flight happened and that monk went at it, the tempo of the fight changed. And that monk, got himself in trouble, did survive the fight, but it's one of those characters that, most groups have them where one character just seems to be really powerful compared to other characters and is the character that can just roll in there and go toe to toe with anything. And as we talked about in our most recent session tonight, actually, any character or creature or whatever in the right circumstances can get nerfed real quick. For every action, there's opposite reaction, if you will. It's kind of a maxim, and D&D is no different. You can a creative DM, with all those tools at our disposal, with the various rules and strategies and monsters and the monster manual and all this stuff and spells. There's ways to challenge any player. There's no player out there that is invulnerable. They may think that, like, I can take anything the DM throws at me, but as long as it's level appropriate, you can, you could drop a Tarrasque on anybody, but that's not what I'm talking about. You can still keep it level appropriate, but still be a challenge, and find a way to challenge that player that just seems to be the Terminator. So anyway, so that was a lot of fun. The fight did progress kind of to its natural conclusion. I don't know if you remember from last video, the rogue Grimy had that great plan that I really liked, but the dice rolls just weren't going his way, where he had gone a few levels above the beholder and had a rope on a grappling hook and was swinging in and trying to swing up to the beholder and throw that vial of purple worm poison that he had milked from the dead purple worm. And I thought that was a great plan, and I was really rooting for him. But the way I did it, I gave him an athletics check, or acrobatics, I think a DC 15, to get close enough to the beholder, and then he needed to make a melee attack, a touch melee attack or whatever, to dump it into its mouth. And that's kind of fiddling with the rules a little bit, because basically having him do 2 actions in one turn. But I couldn't think of any better way to do it, because he's got to swing out and he's got to swing back. And I guess another way I could have done is that every time you swing out, you can swing out to him and make that attempt, but you're not going to swing back till next turn, or next round or whatever. And on his next turn, you're vulnerable to his bite. So I could have done it that way, but I liked it better. Like, he's got to make that that acrobatics and get up there, and then throw in the poison. Anyway, after a couple of attempts, maybe 2 or 3, none of them worked. I was like, because I think once or twice the acrobatics worked, but the touch attack, something would always go wrong. And I was like, well, poor Grimy, made it, swung back, was on the bridge, and one of the layer actions, we had cycled back around, because you have to use all 3 of the layer actions before you can reuse one of them, as we talked about last video. And an eye popped up on the bridge next to Grimy, and it randomly rolled disintegrate, and boom, hit him. He failed his saving throw, and it did enough damage to exceed his hit points, reducing him to 0, and he was disintegrated. Real bummer. But I was actually kind of rooting for him. Now, I didn't want any one particular player's character to die in this fight, but I did want this encounter to be very tough. I wanted it to be one of the challenging encounters of the entire campaign. And if you go read Elven Tower, they're kind of the same way. This would be really tough. So I wasn't getting bloodthirsty, but I did want to make it challenging to the point where somebody could die. They're tackling a beholder in its lair, and it has all the advantage. So I wasn't going to be surprised if a couple of people died. And the players were even going in. They were like, because they sent that message last video, to King Bruiner, basically saying, okay, here's everything that's going on, so you'll know if something happens to us. And they were knowing it was going to be a pretty lethal fight. So I wouldn't have been surprised if 1 or 2 player characters had died, or maybe more even. They were, the first half of the fight, they were doing really well making their saving throws. Between it randomly shooting beams and then them making the saving throws, they did pretty well. But the second part of the fight, things started turning against them. And Grimy, the dwarf rogue, who's a very creative character, the guy that plays Grimy, or played Grimy, he's always very, very creative, and the replacement character is very creative. I didn't want any one player to die, or player character. that is. Now the monk that runs around with the sunblade and his, I didn't want that character to die, but I did want that character to be challenged, to remind the player that, at any given time, you could die. No matter, you feel powerful, but remember, there is a threat in this game, and there's the old uh, quote in football: any given Sunday, on any given Sunday, you can win or lose, no matter how good you are or how bad you are. Any given Sunday, it's a new game. So, like I said, I wasn't out to get any one character, but I did want to make it threatening to the point where a player character could die, because it was that level of encounter. I mean, if I remember right, a CR-14 encounter. And I did want, because I knew that monk player would roll up on the beholder if he could. And so I did want to challenge him. Like I said, I wasn't out to get him. So anyway, so they did finally kill the beholder after multiple, strategies and this and that and all kinds of craziness. They did manage to deliver the killing blow. And what happens at that point is the beholder starts like floating down like 10 feet per round. If you leave your players in combat at that time, which you might want to, because we're in initiative rounds anyway, because it's floating down 10 feet per round, and all the character has to do is get close enough to it, and it just takes an action. They can gouge that eye out. There's nothing special about that. Now, what I did, I applied the same logic, rules, whatever, to the beholder hitting a bridge as I did, the last couple of sessions, where I said, going up or down, there's a random chance of hitting a bridge, instead of drawing out every possible bridge all the way up and down. And the way it worked out, I mean, just by the dice, the beholder floated down about 20 feet and then hit a bridge and was kind of laying, kind of half off of it, kind of like a half deflated ball. So I was like, yay! I mean, they were sad about Grimy, but players being players, they did divvy up his stuff like vultures. Didn't take them very long to do that. It was actually pretty funny, because the magic items, when you disintegrate it, as I said earlier, everything but magic items disappears. And he had a bag of holding and a couple of other things. And the player, so it was like, well, I'll take the bag of holding. And the player who plays Grimy started going through the list of everything that was in the bag of holding, and it was pretty funny. He's very creative. He has a lot of, he's one of those iceberg players where what you see at the table is that much, but he's figured out all this other stuff that he's got written down that's going on with that character. And one of the things that was in the bag of holding was a rat costume. Wow. I was like, I don't even want to know. I don't want to, but evidently, several sessions ago, they go, "Oh yeah, you wore that rat costume and was with the kids." And I'm like, "Wow, wow." So you never know what a player's got going on. That they may even seem like they're, because a lot of times this player is not as engaged at the table, like talking and engaging and da da da. But I mean, they participate, but a lot of times they're just sitting there, kind of listening and thinking. But in reality, all this stuff's going on with that character. So that was really nice. The thing that came out with the double crit that I talked about earlier was the flying monk with a lightsaber. It was just like eye ray after eye ray after eye ray on him, and at one point he got paralyzed. He got telekinesis, pushed away 30 feet, and paralyzed. And I think it had like fear and all kinds of stuff going on him. But a beholder, if you're paralyzed, if a player, creature, or whatever is paralyzed, the beholder gets advantage on its bite, and any successful bite's automatically a crit. So I rolled a natural 20, and it's like, was that a double crit? No, as we said earlier, it wasn't. But yeah, I mean, the monk didn't die, but came close and was getting kind of like, getting the players like, whoa. And then the player who had cast flight on him got put to sleep by the beholder. So, when things were ending right after the beholder died, um, the monk was paralyzed and he was starting to plummet down the mall. Now there was a couple other players that, cast flight on themselves and went and got him and got the beholder, and somebody cast feather fall, and so it was all fine, but it was still kind of funny because we ended a session with like, and now you're plummeting and you're paralyzed. And I love to end on, it's like, boom, close the books, like, see you next week. I love that kind of thing. We talked a little bit about trinkets in the most recent session, and don't forget, D&D 5e introduced like that neat little concept where you can get a free trinket. It's not a game-changing thing, but it's just a neat little flavor thing. And so we kind of talked again about trinkets tonight and reminded, I was like, hey, remind everyone what trinket you have. And that came out because of, we were taught, I think Grimey's trinket was inside his bag of holding. Now, the way that the rest of the beholder's lair plays out is thusly. So let's go over that really quick. But once you kill the beholder, there's really not a lot left to do. You got to get the eye. You got to get the eye back to Vizeran. Now there's these slaves to deal with, and there's a bunch of slaves. Let's see, 40. There's probably close to 100 slaves, give or take a little in here. And there's 21 shield dwarf commoners. There's 17 human commoners. There's 11 moon elf commoners. There's 8 female drow and 1 male drow. There's 5 deep gnomes. There's 23 goblins, and then there's 15 orogs. Now, an orog is it's like a really intelligent big orc, and the lore, if I understand correctly on this, is that they are half orc, half ogre. But the creature type by the book is that they are orc types, but the lore is, like I said, they're a crossbreed. So all of the slaves have 4 levels of exhaustion, and they can't do much more than eat and follow simple instructions. They join the party's expeditionary force if urged or ordered to do so, but they aren't effective combatants until they've rested and reduced their exhaustion level. And then so here's some more on the slaves. It says, if Karazikar and Shedrak are defeated, the beholder's slaves emerge from various tunnels, file out onto the bridges, and kneel in supplication, worshipping their liberators as gods. Each slave bears the brand of Karazikar on its forehead, a scar shaped like an open eye. The slaves are unarmed and include the following, and I just went through all of that. So all of the breakdown of the slaves. Now, if the beholder is reduced to 45 or fewer hit points, it attempts to flee. And this is, like if you get to that point, it says it attempts to flee, ordering Shedrak, if he's still alive, to cover its retreat. So I don't think I just didn't have the beholder flee. You can do that if you want, but I mean, they're there to kill the beholder, make it a tough fight. But if it flees, then what? I mean, so are they going to have to cast flight on it, or on themselves and chase it? I mean, what do they do if this thing flees? I mean, they got to have it, and the only way to get its eye is to kill it. I guess they could go back to Mantle Dareth, which they're not supposed to go back. They're not even supposed to remember where it is and get that beholder's eye. And there's another beholder in the book somewhere, but it is, if it flees, where's it going to flee? It's got all the advantage if it goes up or down. I guess it could turn into like one of those, Three Stooges or Keystone Cops games where, the beholder goes up and they go up and it goes down and they go, and they're going this way and going that way. And finally they meet back up. I don't know. But what I did is I made it a tough fight. And because there's like 8 people in the party plus the shield guardian, I just gave it like another 100 hit points or something like that and just made it a tough fight. So anyway, and I didn't increase the CR for those extra hit points because it was already an extra CR because it was in this layer and get the layer actions. And I don't care how tough a monster is. If you're piling 8 against 1, it's on a certain level, it's going to be a beatdown. It's unfair. So, or at least unstrategic for the monster. So, now what I did with these slaves was, they didn't start worshiping all at once. I had them, peeking out of all these different tunnels on different levels and looking at the players, and oh my goodness. Um, and they, some of them, they can't all speak the languages. Everyone doesn't speak the same languages. I had some slaves like, you killed our god. What are we going to do now? I had other slaves like, we're free. I had other slaves just like they mentally couldn't comprehend what was going on. Others were like, they're not necessarily, they didn't worship Karazikar as strong as some others, but they were like, he at least fed us on a certain level and took care of us. So what are we going to do? And so there was this big mixed reactions. Whereas in the book, they just come out and start worshiping the players. So I didn't play that way, but you can. And I knew going into this, I did not want to grow the expedition with the NPCs any more than I had to. I'm tired of dealing with all these NPCs. I mean, on some level it's fun, but enough. We had all these NPCs at the beginning of Out of the Abyss during the escape. You had to deal with them, and then this expeditionary force, and this is one of the reasons why this is a challenging campaign if you're like a new fresh DM, because there's a lot of extra stuff you have to deal with. I'm not saying it's impossible, but like I said, way back at the beginning of this whole video series we've been starting, I don't recommend this campaign for a brand new DM. Not to say it can't be done, but it can be challenging, even for someone who's played D&D for years and years. And then again, like I said, the book leaves a little bit to be desired in the organization and the information it provides. So the way I handled it was the players were interacting with the slaves, and they started like giving them food, and they used the periaptive water or whatever, endless water, to give them water, and were kind to them. And then the slaves were like, oh, they're benign gods. And then they started kind of wanting to worship them, and the players were, whoa, hey now. And the players were, what do y'all want to do? Do you want to stay here? Do you want to leave? Do you, you're welcome to come with us. And in the way I had it, the way I did the slaves, because some of the slaves were born in Karazikar's maw, the vast Oblivium, the lair. Some of them have been there for a long time. Some of them were relatively new. So there's all this different mixed reaction among the slaves. The slaves that were born there, and basically Karazikar has been their god, little g god, for their whole life. I mean, the concept of leaving, and they're like, what, do you want to go to Gauntlgrim? Do you want to go Gracklestug? Do you want to go to Minzorbrain? It was completely, might as well just say, do you want to go to the moon? I mean, it was just completely alien to them. And these slaves had just been brainwashed and mentally dominated. Like I said, they're exhausted. And so, I had it be a mixed reaction. But ultimately what happened is the Aura, they were like, look, we're going to Gauntlgrim, and you're welcome to come with us, and we'll take you to Gauntlgrim. So that's kind of was the offer from the players, because they've got to go to Gauntlgrim to follow up on this subplot where King Bruiner is like, I need you in Gauntlgrim immediately because of, the diplomatic crisis with the drow that the elf, the warlock started by touching that drow with the madness gem in Mantle Dareth, which that subplot's been hanging over their head. And, that player's like, oh, I don't really want to go back. So that's going to be fun. And we're going to deal with that next session. I've already told the players that we're going to summarize travel. We're going to montage it, and they will be in Gauntlgrim next session dealing with all of that. So basically what happened, what it came down to is the shield dwarves and the humans and the moon elves were all like, yep, we'll go with you to Gauntlgrim. And the dwarves and the humans were like, yeah, sounds good to us. Let's just go. Especially the dwarves, once they found out, because a lot of them don't Gauntlgrim. What do you mean? It's been reestablished by the dwarves? What? Really? Because some of them have been slaves forever, and or a long time, and they didn't even know Gauntlgrim's been reclaimed, by the dwarves. And the moon elves were like, can we get to the surface from Gauntlgrim? And the players were like, yeah, no, okay, we'll go with you. Because the elves want to get out of the Underdark and just get back to the surface. Now, the drow um, and the deep gnomes were like, well, can we travel with you until you can get us to a point where we can strike off on our own and go to our respective cities? And the player's like, sure, that's fine. And then the goblins and the Orogs were like, we're not going to Gauntlgrim. We will not get a good reception at Gauntlgrim, a dwarven city, which is true. They wouldn't. Um, they may somehow escape with their lives, but for it's not, and I guess if the players guaranteed their safety or something, but King Bruiner probably wouldn't be happy about it. So anyway, so they said, okay, well, we will, one of my players who is, their character is a mapper and is constantly, I'm mapping this and that and the other, drew maps, and said, here's how you can, get out on your own or at least get away from us and go do your own thing. So the Orogs and the goblins basically, due to just the nature of the circumstances, kind of banded up and left on their own. And the players let them leave, and they told the expedition, leave them alone, let them leave. And the expedition is like, really? Oh, okay. So that's how it came down. That's how I handle the slaves. And I'm going to montage it. They're going to get to Gauntlgrim, and the people that went with them are, King Bruiner's and his court and they'll take care of the refugees in some fashion. It's not going to be the player's responsibility. Maybe a couple of them will join the expedition or something, but I don't even think so. I don't think that's going to happen, but I'll think on it. And then, the drow at a certain point are going to go their way, and the deep gnomes are going to go their way. And so that way we had kind of interesting role playing with these slaves as refugees, but it's off. I don't have to do a lot of keeping track of this and that, and the players don't have, well, let's put the refugees here and there, and you're on guard, and to deal with all that. So that's how I handled it. You can, of course, season to taste and handle it however you would like. And we did have fun with it, and I kept stressing, I said, some of these slaves are excited to be leaving. Some of them are kind of tentatively excited, but fearful. Like, I don't know what to expect. I've been here so long. Some of them just are crying. They don't want to leave, even though, it's scary to live there. That's what they know. And they've been kind of taken care of on a certain level. And then some just have no frame of reference. They're like, and, they're basically having to be pulled along by the other slaves. So had some fun with it. I did want to role play it. I didn't want to leave it out completely, but I did not want to grow the expedition. I didn't want to do it, but that's my thing. If you want to use these slaves and have all kinds of crazy expedition fun with them, you can ride ahead. So, finishing up the stuff here in the Beholder's Lair. Let's see. Here's what they can find out from the slaves. Slaves know several intriguing bits of information. Karazikar hid its treasure on the uppermost reaches of the chasm. The only way to reach the treasury is by levitation or flight. My players used the lizards because the lizards have spider climb, so I allowed that. They went back and got their lizards and came. They delivered the refugees to the expedition, got their lizards, came back and went up to the top. The Beholder was preoccupied with finding an arcane contraption called the Maze Engine, and I ceded that to the players, kind of gave them a hint a couple of sessions ago, and they just didn't pick up on it, but here it came again. And then the Beholder recently captured a strange mechanical creature that might know where the Maze Engine is located. And there's that information's in the Modron prisoner part on page 177. Everything I'm reading right now is in 177, including the slaves. The creature is locked in a room sealed with a rolling stone door. The Beholder used its telekinesis eye ray to open and close the door. All right. It gives some more information on how to handle the slaves. Now, it says here, if the characters urge the slaves to leave the vast Oblivium and make their own way home, they are all killed while trying to escape from the Wormwrithings. If the characters assign members of their expeditionary force to lead the slaves out of the Wormwrithings, the slaves stand a much better chance of making it to safety. So it says Drowies are eager to return to Menzo Bronzen, Deep Nose to Blending Stone, etc. So handle the slaves however you want. I may have them find some dead goblins and Orogs. I don't know, because they went off on their own. Now, the Modron prisoner, it says one or more slaves can lead characters to a small room on the uppermost level of the complex. I just had them find it. The room is sealed off with 6-inch thick circular stone door that can be rolled aside with a DC 20 strength check. Our dwarf tried and failed. He's all red-faced and veins bulging and all that stuff, tendons in his neck. Or it can be opened with a knock spell or similar magic. The room holds a damaged duodrone, it's a modron, that Karazikar recently captured in the hopes of unlocking more information about the maze engine. The duodrone has 1 hit point remaining and speaks in its own language of clicks and whirs, always referring to itself as we or us. And the only thing this thing speaks is modron. The demonic madness has scrambled its memory, but if a greater restoration spell is cast on it, the modron remembers 2 things. Now, my party keeps running into, they don't have greater restoration yet. Remember, it's a larger party, so they're leveling slower. I've given them greater restoration a couple times in a couple of different ways, but, you know, for the most part, they don't have it. So what I did was, I decided that if A, they cast lesser restoration, and B, also healed it some hit points, that it would somewhat come around and be able to give them some information, but it would still be kind of addled. And that's what we ended up doing. And the warlock has telepathy and talked with it through telepathy. And, you know, they did lesser restoration, and the warlock gave the modron a healing potion and all of this stuff, and kind of on their own. They kind of, you know, did it on their own. I didn't really prompt them. I just kept saying that, you know, it's kind of beat up and acting kind of cuckoo. You know, and I think after the restoration spell, I said it seems to be a little bit more clear-headed, but, you know, it's talking about that it's in pain and stuff like that. So they gave it like a healing potion. And then after that, it just kind of followed the warlock around, kind of bonded with her. And so they took the modron with them. And I explained, I said, look, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be insensitive. I said, but you basically have like a mentally challenged kind of like 10-year-old with you. So that's kind of the level of what's going on with this modron. I just want you guys to understand, you know, kind of the gist of having this thing with you. And they're like, okay, that's fine. So anyway, what they can get out of the duodrone, this modron, is, one, we were part of a great march. We were separated, then we were lost. Then we were captured. Then we started freaking out. Then you found us. And then also, we know nothing about a maze engine. However, we can detect an orderer approximately 289 miles south of our present location. The orderer, claims the modron, is a device that brings order to chaos. It is, in fact, what others refer to as the maze engine. So what I did was, with the lesser restoration and the healing, they only got, I don't know what a maze engine, or we don't know what a maze engine is. However, we can detect an orderer approximately 200 miles south of our present location. I didn't give them the extra information that the orderer is a device that brings order to chaos, blah, blah, blah. So I gave them a little bit of information, but not everything. Then they went up, found the treasure, and the treasure room is cool. Like, it's at the top of this chasm in the very top of the chamber. Karazikar had kind of carved a rough sculpting of its face, of it, looking down the maw, the chasm, and where the eye would be is like a chamber, kind of a tunnel they can go in, and that's the treasure room. Pretty cool. So it says, the beholder used its disintegration eye ray to carve a rough likeness of itself in the ceiling of Karazikar's maw, a great stone beholder face glaring down upon the gaping chasm. Its central eye, a hollow shaft that leads up to a hemispherical vault where the beholder hides its considerable hoard. 15,000 gold pieces, 13,000 platinum pieces, 10 assorted gems worth 500 GP each, a gem of seeing, a necklace of adaptation, and a robe of eyes. That's a pretty big haul. I toned that down a little bit. I mean, that's a lot of fat loot. I toned it down just a little bit, and some of the robe of eyes the players already have. One of the players already does, and the gem of seeing, there's a couple of player characters that already do something. They have abilities that kind of make that a little bit redundant. So I did some random rolls on I think table G in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and they ended up just randomly like with a +2 shield and a +2 short sword or something like that, and they were kind of happy with that. So, but they did get the necklace of adaptation, and they got the gems, and they did get some gold, and they got some platinum pieces, and they got gems, but not just as for me personally as much as was in the book. Now the other thing that happened with the beholder and all of that is after they killed the beholder, instead of scooping out the eye, they teleported back using the wand of limited vengeancy underdark teleportation back to the Tower of Vengeance, that cave, and they delivered the entire beholder's corpse to Vizeran. And I mean, it was like, keep in mind, he's still a drow archmage, so he's gonna have a certain personality, but it might as well have been, might as well have won the lottery. He was like, what? And so we had a little comic relief without completely destroying the character of Vizeran between him and Grin, his apprentice, and the fact that an entire beholder corpse, because I mean, for a mage, I mean, that's an entire corpse of a beholder is crazy. So especially, one that I would imagine is kind of older and powerful, like Karazikar. So that was fun. And then when they teleported back, I had a little fun with the wand of limited vengeancy underdark teleportation, which remember is not in the book. It's just something I invented to help the players move around in a very limited, specific way, so they couldn't, abuse it. And it's a ritual. It takes 10 minutes to cast. And one of my players tonight was like, well, I'm attuned to it. And I was like, no, you don't attune to it. It's a device that you can use like a ritual. It takes 10 minutes. I said, but there's no attuning, because they were talking about who could use what magic items and this and that and the other. And I said, there's no attuning to this thing, even though I'd said that before. Sometimes you got to remind people. So it's just a narrative device more than anything else. So when they went back to Karazikar's Mall. Now, two players had flight on them. They flew down to where the corpse was, and they decided to immediately use the teleportation wand and teleport those two characters and the corpse of the beholder back to Vizeran from the bridge. And I said, from the bridge? They said yes. And I said, okay. And I was like, well, this is, I was kind of implying, they said we can teleport a beholder's corpse, right? And I was like, oh, that might be kind of fun. And so I think they thought I was going to do something with the beholder's corpse. And I did kind of consider it, because there's so much crazy magic inherent magic in a beholder. But I said, no, I didn't do that. But what I did do, because they teleported from the bridge, and if you remember, they have to teleport back to precisely where they teleported from. And it's sort of a radius that you teleport in, and they didn't say, well, we're going to see exactly where we're standing, and then when we teleport back, we're going to make sure to be standing in exact spots, because the bridge is only 10 feet wide, and the radius of the wand can basically, the limit of it is the fully outfitted expedition and all its members. So there's a radius, and I did say that you can't do your expedition and all those refugees. I said it's too much. And they were like, yeah, we wouldn't take those refugees back to Vizeran anyway. I said, that's pretty smart, because, he's like, ooh, test subjects. But anyway, so when they teleported back, I gave each character a 50% chance of being standing in open space and not on the bridge and plummeting. And one of them I rolled like a 98, so they were fine. The other one I rolled a 1. So down they went. Fortunately, it was a monk, not the same monk with the lightsaber and all that, that was flying, but it was a monk that had, I think it's called soft landing or something like that. And by the rolls, they only went down 20 or 30 feet before they hit a bridge randomly. And so they were fine, but it was still kind of fun to like you didn't think that through, did you? If you're teleporting from a bridge. So anyway, that's everything. Let me see if there's anything I missed. I don't think so. There's some other stuff like Wave, that was wanting to, because Wave, the trident, always wants to proselytize for a sea deity and all these slaves. It was like, that were wanting to worship, and it was having a field day with that. But anyway, that gives you the main gist. Elif, the warlock who is kind of in hot water with Bruenor for creating this diplomatic crisis with the Dark Elves, did take advantage of a sending stone at one point when they went back to the Tower of Vengeance, because the other character went up to knock on the door like, we got a dead beholder, and Elif stayed behind. And there's sending stones at all of the different outposts, and there's a guard outpost they've established there. She used the sending stones when nobody was around, and sent messages to Gauntlgrim that the warlock defeated the beholder single-handedly, and all this crazy stuff. So I don't know. I guess trying to make herself look good, because she knows she knows that the other shoe is going to fall. So it's interesting that the subplot I've done just to have fun and reinforce the fact that, your actions have consequences in the game. So if you're going to do dumb stuff or spontaneous, weird, crazy stuff, especially in a heavy, ominous kind of campaign, I'm not going to say you can't do it, but there will be repercussions. And, so it's interesting. It's kind of taking on a life of its own, and we're having fun with it. So I feel like maybe I'm kind of helping make the point without, being too heavy handed, and everybody's having fun with it. So anyway, that's it. We'll catch you next time on Shane Plays. Thanks so much for watching. If you would, leave this video a comment and a thumbs up. I will catch you next time as we head to Gauntlgrim. Now, next video, the vast majority of it will probably not be out of the book. Okay, because this whole Gauntlgrim thing with the diplomatic crisis is something that's come out of my own campaign. So just, want to give you that heads up ahead of time. But anyway, we'll catch you next time. Thanks so much for watching Shane Plays.
Why is this happening to me? Dog, please, you stupid! Hi, they went right down here. They came in my kitchen and they broke my bullseye.